Good day, everyone. This coin represents your information, your data. The plastic bag represents your computer. So you put your information and your data in your computer. However, all it takes is one click from one of your employees on a phishing email, and the data is now in the hands of the bad guys. Hi, everyone. My name is Sheridan Smith, and I am an IT professional of 40+ years. I'm currently the president of ISC Squared, and I want to welcome you to this presentation, Information Security for small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses. And when I say small to medium-sized businesses, I kind of try to tailor-make this conversation for small companies, 3 to 50 people. Having been a business owner myself for 13 years, I understand the importance of security. So at first, I want to just give you a bit about ISC Squared. ISC Squared is the stands for International Information Systems Security Certification Consortium. ISC Squared was founded in mid-1989, and it is the standard for information security. And it provided the first common book of knowledge, what we call common book of knowledge, in this particular topic in 1990. The credentials you see here are the credentials that you can get, and they are the most popular IT security credentials in the industry. CISSP is the one I held. I've held that for over 15 years. Our mission as a local chapter is number one, to be a resource for cybersecurity education, awareness programs, and technical expertise to the country. Number two is to be a conduit through our members and throughout the world for the local community, empowering students and teachers and businesses to be safe and secure online. And our third mission is to connect with and to inspire others to join our chapter and to consider a career in IT, especially IT security. Big demand for IT security right now and in the very near future. Some of the things we hope to do in our chapter is to connect other professionals and to provide knowledge, to educate, to help students obtain the certifications, etc. We offer also the global organization offers scholarships that are eligible to anyone in the world, so including Bermudians. We want to inspire younger people. We want to inspire interest groups like yourselves, small businesses to be secure, and so forth. So also we want to mention that ISC Squared is a nonprofit organization, and it has a charitable foundation known as the Center for Cyber Safety and Education. I want to make this known to people that this information is available for young and old. So on these websites, you can get information for your children, how bullying online, being safe and secure online, what not to post, etc. Also information for seniors on banking and being secure online, etc. They've teamed up with Garfield to make it interesting for the young people. So here are 2 websites that you probably should write down if you want, if you have children and grandchildren, and parents even that are online and are very unfamiliar with the dangers and the threats of being online. So 2 good sites to get some valuable information. A bit about myself. You'll learn more about me as I tell you about as we talk today. But my career goes back to 1978. You can do the mathematics. When I was in high school, I became very interested in computers. At that time, it was called data processing, information technology. The term cybersecurity did not exist. I was a business owner for 13 years, MicroEdge Computer Services Limited, where we won a Best of Bermuda Award in 1995 for our computer services, even though we were a very small company. I currently hold many certifications, constant learner, still learning, always learning. And the latest one I passed on Saturday is the ISO 27001 lead implementer. ISO 27001 we'll be talking about in a bit. Okay, but first, the evolution of information security, the need for security. When I was a young man, a little boy, my grandmother's house was never locked. But now, my grandmother's house, if she was still alive, it would probably have security locks, maybe an alarm system, et cetera, et cetera. So the need has changed. So I want to talk about the evolution of information security before I get into our main topic today. 30s and 60s, 30s to 50s. So the German code machine known as the Enigma. It was a precursor for the first modern computers. The first version of the Enigma was created in the 1930s. The British and the American managed to break later, more complex versions during World War II. The increasingly complex versions of the Enigma, especially in submarine version, caused considerable anguish for the Allied forces before finally being cracked. Information gained from decrypted transmission was used to anticipate the actions of German armed forces. The history of information security begins with the history of computer security. The need for computer security, in other words, the need for to secure the physical location of hardware and software from outside threats began almost immediately after the first mainframes were developed and put into use. The multiple levels of security to protect these mainframes became the focus for the safety of data integrity. We'll talk about that in a bit. But groups developing code-breaking computations during World War II created the first modern computers. And this is the very first computer created in 1945, known as ENIAC. And it was huge. And funny enough, it was women who programmed these machines. And over the years, somehow women got out of IT, but now slowly coming back into IT, which is a good thing to see. But the first computer was a large mainframe computer in 1945. In the 60s, so back then, the security for the military, to time-sensitive military information and locations, was controlled by the use of badges, keys, and facial recognition of authorized personnel. That was the security. The growing needs for maintaining national security, however, including background investigations and ongoing counterintelligence programs, eventually expanded in the procedures for computer security to embrace more complex and more technological sophisticated safeguards. So 1965 was the first time that two computers at MIT communicated with one another. Remember, the first mainframe was a big thing and it didn't talk to any, there were no other computers to talk to. There were no such things as networks. In 1969, a very important date, the precursor of the internet was established. And it is, what's something I want to mention here? So in contrast to the computer security information during those early years, was rudimentary and mainly composed of simple document classification schemes. There was no application because local projects for computers or operating systems at that time, the primary threat was physical theft or espionage against the products. One of the first documented security problems that was not physical in nature occurred years later in the early 1960s, when an administrator was working on something known as a MOTD, a message of the day file, and another administrator was editing the password file. A software glitch makes the two files. The entire password file was printed on every output file. So it combined the two files. During the Cold War of the 1960s, many more mainframes brought online accomplished more complex and sophisticated work. However, this security vulnerability was the first of its kind. At this time, it became necessary to find a way to enable mainframes to communicate with each other using a less cumbersome process than merely magnetic tapes between computer centers. That's what they used to do. In response to this need, the Department of Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, known as ARPA, began examining the feasibility of a redundant networked communication system designed to support the military's need to exchange information. Larry Roberts was his name, known as the founder of the internet, developed the project from its inception. And the project was named ARPANET. And it is the origin of today's internet. At the close of the 20th century, as network computers became more common, so the need to network computers became more common. But the 70s. In 1972, BBN's Ray Tomlinson introduces the network email. So this was the first email, Internet Working Work Group, it was known as. In 1973, global networking becomes a reality as the University College of London in England and Royal Radar Establishment in Norway connect to ARPANET. The term Internet is born in 1973. In 1974, the first Internet service provider is born with the introduction of a commercial version of ARPANET, known as Telnet. Some of you may remember Telnet. During those times, in the 70s, I was actually in high school, and I started to read Popular Mechanic. And I knew at that time I wanted to be a data processing manager. That was the title. And CIO did not exist, but I wanted to be a data processing manager. Also in the 70s, in 1975, the first computers, personal computers, came as kits. They were kits, and they had an Intel 8080 CPU in them. And then also Zillow created the Z80 processor at that time. Bill Gates and Paul Allen wrote in 1975 the basic compiler for Altair and later formed Microsoft. In 1976, Apple's two Steve Jobs and was Wozniacki, I always have problem with that word, designed the Apple I around the 65002 processor. Also at that time, 76 was the first word processing program and the first floppy drives. In 1979, things changed, and the third important software category database was created, known as Database 2. Also, it was the first modem. I remember having my first modem. A modem was used to communicate between two computers. Back then, I was working for a company called Data Communications Limited, right out of high school. I was a computer operator. We had a borrower's mainframe computer. It was on Victoria Street in Purvis Limited. We were owned by August, partly owned by August Insurance. Back then, there was time sharing. So Datacom offered time sharing through their mainframe. We offered time sharing to the hospital, to August Insurance, of course, and a few others. So those companies had dumb terminals in there, and they would provide information, but also that information came to us on punch cards. And back then, I remember the security, during the day, it was 2 shifts, a day shift and a night shift, and then a week off. It was a wonderful job. 1 day, 1 week night shift, 1 week day shift, and then a week off. But the security was very limited. The main thing was don't drop the punch cards because you're in trouble trying to put them back together. But there was limited security. There was a lock on the data center itself, but it wasn't sophisticated. It was a simple lock. If I remember correctly, it might have been a key lock. But in any case, security was so different back then. In the 1980s, while I was in university, estimates are that there were about 1 million personal computers in use in 1980. In 1981, Adam Osborne introduced the first portable computer. Look at that thing. I remember seeing that, my first job at the Bank of Bermuda in 1983. The first laptop in 1981 was this made by Epson, and that's what it looked like. Okay, so 1983, a significant year, because ARPANET adopted something known as TCP/IP. TCP/IP is a protocol by which information is shared between computers. We call it packet switching. IP is an IP address. You may have heard that term. But in January 1st, 1983, it was formally adopted for the internet, for use on the internet. It has been said that the internet is the greatest thing that ever happened to us because we're all connected together. But it's also the worst thing that ever happened to us because we're all connected together. So now networks became popular. Now the need for security is shifting. Absolutely. So in 1983, something known as DNS, domain name systems, establishes what we call .com and .gov and all those different . So those are names of websites, but this was established using IP addresses, and domain name systems helped us So I have an IP address for, but I want to reach Microsoft.com, but I don't know what their IP address is. So the DNS does that for me, like a telephone book. 1984, I'm the first person to use the word cyberspace. Okay, during this period, I was working at the Bank of Bermuda. Security with first PCs. Again, security was minimal. We had, well, the bank, of course, had the security guards at the door. You needed an access card to get into the floor. But once you're on the floor, again, it was just username and passwords. No such thing as two-factor authentication, etc. I also was working for Exxon Corporation. I spent 1 year in Exxon Corporation's Florham Park, New Jersey facilities, a large facility. So at the gate, there are several security guards, as well as you need to provide a picture ID. And then once you go through the gate, you drive at least 2 miles to the facility. So that is a case where if anyone was to breach the gate, they have enough time to call authorities because that's a 2-mile drive to get to the facility. And then inside the facility, there was standard computers security at that time. Again, in the past, your main thing was your badge and your username and password. Again, no two-factor authentication. Communications was mainly between working my Bermuda office. We talked through what we call frame relay, because again, the internet was not fully, although it was introduced in '83, it was not fully where it is today. Important point I want to mention: during those years, I noticed a change in security. I had the privilege of going to a Microsoft data center, cloud. When they use the word cloud, they're talking about a data center. It's not in the sky somewhere. So I had the privilege of going to a Microsoft data center. Okay, you make an appointment. If the appointment is at 9 a.m., you better be there on time. If you miss it by 1 minute, you cannot. You have to make another appointment. Security. So the first thing to do is they take away my cell phone and I walk through a metal detector. Once through the metal detector, I enter looks like an elevator, open glass, so the door closes behind me, the door in front of me is still closed. And what they're doing at that time is weighing me. Okay, once the door opens up, I go to the rack. All the other racks are locked. They need 2 factors to get in. You need a combination lock, a combination code, and you also needed thumbprint. So we go to the rack. We're allowed 1 hour, whatever it is, specifically, we have to be out on time. And when we're out, we're weighed on the way out to make sure that we're not stealing anything. So it's security, just to show you how things have changed with respect to security over those years. The 1990s, real quick, just to give you some information, the World Wide Web became really popular in 1991. They introduced this as the World Wide Web in HTML. There was a large impact on how to navigate and view the internet at that time. Surfing the internet was finally coined in 1992. 1993, websites reached about 600. Look where we are now. Oh my gosh. The number of computers connected to internet grows from 2,000 in 1995 to more than 2 million in 1993. In 1998, Google search engine is born, changing the way users engage with the internet. In 2004, Facebook goes online and the era of social networking begins. 2000 plus. Just real quick, just some information. YouTube launches in 2006. AOL changes its business model. Twitter launches in 2009. Internet marks its 40th anniversary. 2010, Facebook reaches 4 million active users. Pinterest and Instagram are also launched in 2010. And in 2013, Edward Snowden, the former CIA employee and National Security Agency contractor, reveals that the NSA had in place a monitoring program capable of tapping the communications of thousands of people in the United States of America. In 2013, 51% of US adults report that they bank online. Instagram in 2015. In 2016, Google unveils Google Assistant. Oh, wow. So now, I want to give them some definitions before we go any further about our topic so that we can be on the same page. Information. Information is an asset which has value for the organization, which needs to be protected. It can have various forms and can be stored on different media like digital or paper, but it can also be in a spoken form. Security. Security is the quality or state of being secure, to be free from danger. It means to be protected from adversaries. from those who would do harm intentionally or otherwise. Okay, so every successful organization should have the following multiple layers of security in place in their operations. Even if you're very small, there's physical security. I remember I had my own business for several years. Physical security. Make sure you're addressing the physical security and protecting the physical. Number two is personal security. You know, protect information of my employees. Protecting my own information as well. And if you have customers now, of course, you have to protect also their information. But personal security, and also security physically. And if depending on what you're selling, you may have need for security guards, etc., because you're leaving the office at night with loads of money, etc. There's operations security. Day-to-day operations, making sure that even if you're a small company, make sure you have a username and password for people to log into the computer, especially if that computer has financial information of your customers, etc. So operational security. Communication security. How are you gonna, even if it's three of us, me and I have two or three employees, how am I going to communicate? First of all, security has to begin with me. It's important. As business owners, we must take responsibility and approach this thing seriously. We really must. If we want to be in business for the long run, if we want to make a profit, we must take security very serious and communicate that to everybody on our team, everyone who works for us, and also those third parties that we work, third party suppliers, etc. So there's network security. Now that there's networks, you might have a file server and several people logging into it. So there's network security, and then of course within network security, there comes the cyber concerns, cybersecurity. And then there's information security, which we're about to discuss. So information security, and we call it short for InfoSec, is the protection of information and systems and hardware that use it and store it and transmit that information. There's something in this industry code known as the CIA triad, and it's part of the standard for maintaining security since the mainframe days. It stands for confidentiality, which is the assurance of data privacy, which allows only authorized persons to access that information. So the number one thing we want to do in security is maintain the confidentiality of the information and the data. Integrity, CIA, integrity, assurance that only authorized persons can modify that data, meaning protecting the accuracy and completeness of the information. So even as a small business owner, I have 2 or 3 employees. I cannot allow that employee, when I'm not there, to maliciously or by an error modify data without my knowledge. So I have to ensure the integrity of the data that I'm holding for my clients, or for myself, for my own business. Availability, very important one that people tend to forget. Availability, the data and the information must be available to you when you need it. So this is the insurance of the timely and reliable access to data and services for authorized users. Okay, so here's an example. Let's say I want to open up a bank account, $10,000. The confidentiality is that only people that should know that is me, several people in the bank, not everybody, and perhaps the authorities. Some of the authorities, like if the bank has to do an audit or whatever. So integrity. So I put in $10,000. When I go next week, I don't want to see 5,000. I want to see 10 plus interest. So I think that data should not be modified without my knowledge. And then there's of course the availability. When I go to the bank and say I need $5,000, I don't want to hear them say our systems are down. Sorry, sir, you have to come back next week because it's going to take us a week to fix it. So availability. All right. One quick lesson about availability, and I've learned this lesson. I've been in IT for 40+ years. I learned this lesson when I had my own business, and I'll never forget this. And I will share it with you real quick. I was developing some software for a client, and I was 6 or 7 months into the project. And I always teach backups to people. And I teach backups every day. Backups are very important, but I hadn't done a backup for months. And I thought I was deleting a single file, and I deleted the entire work that I had been doing for 6 months. And I lost it all. It wasn't available. It was no longer available. I was protected the confidentiality because I had my doors locked and no one else had access to that computer that I was developing on. I maintained the integrity because I made sure no one else changed it, but I forgot the availability. I didn't back it up. So it's important. Availability is very important. Vulnerability is any weakness. You heard these terms in the cybersecurity world. I want you to understand what they mean. Any weakness that could potentially be exploited. It could be a software, hardware, a process, or human. Examples in application vulnerabilities is like an unpatched system. You heard of patches, like Microsoft patches. The Microsoft operating system is horrible, and I miss DOS prompt. But anyhow, you got patches every week, so you don't miss your patches. Don't miss your patches, folks. Misconfiguration or just having an unlocked door. That's a vulnerability. You're creating a vulnerability. My grandmother's house was vulnerable because she didn't lock her doors. A threat is any potential damaging event associated with the exploitation of a vulnerability. Actors that exploit vulnerabilities are called threat agents, bad actors. So the threat to my grandmother's house at that time was that people didn't steal much. There was very little stealing going on, very little. So the threat was, there was no threat. Even though she had jewelry, she had some valuables in there, it was no threat. So she didn't lock her doors. The categories of threats. First, the categories are threats are in 12 categories, 5 groups, but 12 categories. First one is acts of human error or failure. An example, accidents, employee mistakes. Number 2, compromise to intellectual property. That's piracy or copyright infringements. Number 3, deliberate acts of espionage or trespass. Examples, unauthorized access and or data collection from your systems. Another threat is deliberate acts of information extortion. Nowadays, they call it ransomware, but back in the day, it was blackmail of information disclosure. 5, another threat is deliberate acts of sabotage, vandalism. A bad employee, a disgruntled employee can be a bad thing. Number 6, deliberate acts of theft. Number 7, deliberate software attacks. This is extremely popular now. Back in the day, there didn't no such thing, folks. When I began my career, this began in the 1990s, and it's much, much, much worse. It said that you can put a brand new computer out of the box on the internet, and within less than 5 minutes, it can be infected if you start browsing all over the place. But anyhow, deliberate software acts, viruses, worms, macros, and denial of service attacks. There is the forces of nature, of course. We forget these things. Again, that comes up to the availability. So fires, floods, hurricanes for us. And lightning. Lightning can destroy equipment. I've had several computers be destroyed, and that's why they invented surge protectors. Number 9, deviations in quality of service from my service provider. Like for instance, Velco. Velco doesn't provide me power, or in this day and age, we got the ISPs, OneCom, et cetera, et cetera. Number 10, technical hardware failures or errors, equipment failures, and so forth. 11, technical software failures or errors. There's bugs in your code. And 12, technological obsolescence. So my equipment gets old. That is a threat. People don't think of that, but that's a threat. You have to be thinking about this all the time. We don't want that computer to die on us tomorrow. And we're trying to run a business, and we don't have a spare in place. We don't have a plan to buy an insurance plan or a hardware maintenance plan to get a new one. So it's important to consider antiquity. When it is a threat. It's considered a threat. By the way, if you have any questions, just please pop them into the chat, and we'll try to answer them as we go. But certainly, we'll answer them at the end. But if there's any pressing questions, please raise Lejan can let me know, and we can answer that question. Okay, so that's threats. The next thing we heard a topic here about in this world is risk. Now, a risk is a likelihood that a vulnerability, which we discussed, can be exploited, and the corresponding impact of such an event, and the corresponding impact on such an event. Risk ties the vulnerability, the threat, and likelihood of exploitation to the resulting business impact. So there's a risk. So my grandmother left her house unlocked because she didn't think the risk was very high, because there wasn't any stealing going on. But nowadays, people do not. So then when that changed a bit, you know what she did? She locked the door, but she put the key under the mat. She felt that made it a little more secure. And then finally, the key was not left on the mat, was left in her purse. And there were those who needed the key were given one. So the risk change. As the threat, as the risk changes, as the threats change, the risk changes, and now you become more vulnerable. Vulnerability changes. Exposure. Exposure is the potential that a security breach could occur. First, for instance, An unpatched system exposes the organization to a potential loss. So you have one of your computers in your small office, so five to six, 7 people, and one of those computers is not patched, and it gets exposed to a bad guy, and he exposes the vulnerability of that patch. The patch that you didn't put on your computer exposes the vulnerability. Countermeasures, these are what we call controls that we put in place to mitigate a risk. Controls include the security guards, use of access control lists, deployment of firewalls, and enforcement of strong passwords, and the use of encryption. One tip, if you don't get anything from this today, if you're running a small business and you require your employees to log in to the computer with username and password, which you should do, make sure that you enforce, if you have an IT guy, get him to enforce strong passwords. Nothing less than 10 characters. And as a matter of fact, I really recommend 16 characters these days. To make it simple, you use a sentence. I love the month of December. That's 20-something characters. They'll never crack that. So strong passwords, countermeasures. That's just countermeasures. Another countermeasure is, of course, security access code and televisions and all kinds of countermeasures. Okay, social engineering, you might have heard this term. Is the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that may be used for fraudulent purposes. Social engineering. So phishing comes out of social engineering. Phishing is a fraudulent attempt to obtain sensitive information or data, such as usernames and passwords and credit card details, by disguising oneself as a trustworthy entity in an electronic communication. So you get an email from Microsoft saying, "Oh, your account has been," I got them recently, "your account has been compromised. Please log in and type in create a new password." So you follow that instruction. You follow that. That's a phishing email, but you don't know that because you don't know the signs of phishing email. So you click on the link, you follow the instructions, and you type it in. But when you click on that link, it takes you to a fake website. And then when you type in that password, they're capturing your username and password. Now they have your information. Phishing. Most popular way in is by the bad guys is phishing. I got a report just yesterday that this year in 2021, phishing is still 53%, accounts for 53% of all breaches, and 41% is another one. But in any case, it's 53%. Used to be higher. Malware, this is a very important word you're going to hear, a very important term you should know. Malware is a malicious software. It's an umbrella term that describes any malicious computer program or code that is harmful to your systems. You get malware from surfing the internet, or you can get it from a USB stick. Somebody gives you a USB stick. Hey, put this in your computer, or you find it on the ground. Don't use USB sticks you found. So USB sticks, but mostly malware is introduced to your network through emails, phishing emails, or websites, going to a fake website. All right, so you got to protect yourself. Make sure your employees are security aware. A cyber attack is a deliberate action by a threat agent or bad action to gain access or disrupt information systems with the intent of stealing data, causing damage or harm. They generally involve the following steps. I want you to know these steps because it helps you understand how you protect yourself. So, reconnaissance. Based on, the first step in an attack is the gathering of information about the target organization by the attacker. The attacker conducts research to learn about the target by performing web searches, examining social media accounts of the organization and its employees, reading press releases about the company, media articles, attending conferences, symposia. They go to trade shows, or even physically observing your organization's employees and your facilities. The attacker attempts to uncover as much information as possible about the target. They want to know domain names. They get information about corporate information, network diagrams, names of employees and key managers, employee addresses and phone numbers, social media activity and friends, so facility location and layout, ingress and egress details. So So all this information they gather during the reconnaissance stage, just by surfing the internet and doing those other things that I said. There are tools available free of charge that you can get to do some of this stuff, some of this reconnaissance work. It's amazing what's out there. But that's what they're doing during the reconnaissance. And during reconnaissance, you have, you're not talking, they're not just scanning. So your computer, ABC company, Micro-Age Computer Company was my company. When the bad guys are surfing the net, the scanning, what we call scanning, they can come across Micro-Age Computer Services file server, reaching out to the website, etc. But reaching out to the web. So renumeration. So based on the data gathered from reconnaissance activities, the attacker analyzes reconnaissance results to attempt to identify specific targets, such as people, organizations, departments even, facilities, capabilities, data, vendor names, and information systems. They use this information. The attacker then conducts a scan of the environment to produce a list of systems and then probe further to discover vulnerabilities that could be possibly exploited. So they gather this information about the company during the reconnaissance. Enumeration, now they got, okay, Sheridan Smith, Micro-Age Computer Services Limited. I think he has something that I want. Let me see what vulnerabilities he has. So let me just see if he's been patching. So they look for the vulnerabilities and they look to exploit them during this phase. So the primary goal of this phase is the enumeration of the organization's systems and data to identify vulnerabilities to exploit in the next phase. Exploitation. Once the assets and the vulnerabilities are enumerated, the attacker can design and execute their attack in this phase through probing and exploiting specific abilities with the goal of gaining access, unauthorized access, to your enterprise. Many times, this involves something we call weaponization, which is designing and creating tools to aid in the attack. Here are some of the weaponization and exploitation tools and methods commonly used by attackers. As I said, number one is phishing. Number one exploitation, weaponization, which is obtaining sensitive information by disguising oneself as a trusted entity. Fake websites used for harvesting sensitive information and credentials, as I mentioned earlier. Malware, software that intentionally is harmful or malicious. Virus is a type of malware that usually is hidden in another application. So be careful of free applications. Be careful. A Trojan. Virus. Trojan is a virus that disguises itself as something else, like the Trojan horse of the ancient Greek. Trojan. So it pretends to be something that it's not. So sometimes you say, oh, somebody wants to sell you, here's an example, someone wants to sell you, you need some antivirus software. Buy this antivirus software and it will make your machine go faster. So they pretend to be something useful, but really it's not. A worm is a virus that propagates itself to other systems. So if my computer in my office gets a worm and I'm connected to JS Valles, or I'm connected to your company, I can pass that worm on to you. Or even as individuals, we can pass worms on to each other, our computers. Something called a rootkit. It's a virus that hides itself by modifying the operating system. This one is really, really, really a bad guy. And then we talked about social engineering, what that is, tricking someone to do something that not in their best interest. Scripting, this is another popular one, that's manipulating data entered into fields to produce unintended results. Scripting, the bad guys create these scripts, and when you think you're typing something in there that you think it's harmless, they're actually creating bad things like macros and stuff like that. So vulnerability, and then of course there's vulnerability-specific attacks. That's where for something you might have heard of, exploiting buffer overflows or some other defects. So like I said, if there's a vulnerability that's been discovered by Microsoft or Adobe or some other company software that you have on your computer, you need to put it on right away, because that vulnerability is this is what we're talking about here when we say vulnerability specific attacks. So when Microsoft says that they found a vulnerability in Microsoft Excel, you need to patch it right away. As soon as they give you that patch available, make that patch available. And then the last step is known as action on the objectives. So once the attacker gains access, they can exfiltrate or steal data, which is known as compromise of confidentiality. They can modify that data, which is a compromise of integrity, or they can destroy that data and otherwise disrupt the environment, which is a compromise of availability. Ransomware. If your machine, if your network is affected by ransomware, unless you have a backup and you're willing to lose maybe a day's worth of work because it happened late in the afternoon, you have to pay. Otherwise, you lose all your data. So your data is unavailable during that period. Okay, so now let's get into some things about. Is there any questions we want to answer? Let's have a look here at chat here. Okay, all right. So let's go now into one of the first areas of information security that you need to establish in your company is governance and risk management. Okay, so information security governance, what is it? It's a framework that guides the development and the maintenance of a security program. So information security program, that's what we call it. We're a program whereby we're implementing controls. The program consists of risk management and implementing controls. So it's a number of things. So it's called a security program. There is no single standard for information security governance frameworks, but the framework should include the following elements. All right, so your framework should have a definition of information security strategy aligned with organization's governance and organization's goal. This don't have to be, okay, so I'm running a small computer business, consulting business. So I need to say, okay, I need to define some simple definitions of my company. I obviously have organizational goals that I want to accomplish. So how does that align with my security? If my goal is to be in business to make a profit, then I need to make sure that I'm securing the data, etc. So I need to come up with a strategy for security for my company and document it. Doesn't have to be elaborate, but just document that you agree as a leader of this company, owner of this company, that we're going to have security program in place, and these are the goals of our company and why we want to have it in place. This is what we offer as our services. You put it in context, and then you create this definition. The second thing is information it should have is an information security organizational structure. So even if you're small, you don't have an IT guy, well, you as the owner have to take responsibility for information security. You're like me, perhaps you're feeding your family at the time, and you need to be in profit. You need to make a profit. You need to be in business for the long run because I'm here to make a profit. So you take leadership. You take ownership of the security program, and you lead it. If not, if you have an IT person, even if it's one guy, then give him that responsibility. But be fair. If you're going to give him more responsibility, then you might want to consider changing his or her pay because it is a lot of work. But also, we're going to talk about that. You need a budget for security. If it takes security serious, then you need to develop a small budget, even if it's small. But that's information of structure. Somebody has to be in charge, and somebody has to report upwards if it's not the manager. The third thing you need is a methodology for risk management, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be very simple. I have a laptop. What are my risks? Somebody could steal it, malicious code, etc. But we'll get into that in a second. But a methodology for risk management, and then fourthly, is an information security management directives. You need policies, even if they're small. You need policies. You need some standards. You need some procedures, and so forth. And you need to pass that information down. And then finally, you must measure how success. So continuous measurement using certain matrix that you define in the beginning, and then improve another program, your audited program. You can do a self-audit, or if you're a big enough company, you can hire somebody to do an audit for you, but you must do audit. You must audit your program to see how it's doing and to continuously improve on it. You cannot rest on your laurels. You must continuously look at the risk. Risk evolve, risk change, threats change. Okay, the drivers for information security governance. The external drivers are things like regulatory drivers. If you come under a regulator, VMA, etc., then you must have some. Should be a driver for good information security governance. Industry practices. That's things like if you're healthcare. In America they have to abide by HIPAA, and soon we're about to have a GDPR equivalence in Bermuda known as PIPA, or PIPA, some people call it, Personal Information Privacy Act. so it's equivalent to GDPR in Europe. But that's industry practices. So if you're selling customers and using credit card machines, you've got the PCI DSS, I believe it's called. And then, of course, the external drivers are your risk and your threats. Of course, that's an external driver. Consider your risk and consider your threats. Do not be negligent if you want to be in business for the long haul. Internal drivers is your leadership, understanding, and perception. Again, it has to start from the top. Information security must start from the top. It cannot start from the bottom. So you have to get a good understanding of where you want to be. If you have partners, get together, talk about it. What is our perception of security? I hope it changes after today, but get a good understanding of leadership. Management structure, again, depending on your size of your organization. If you have an IT guy, is he going to report upwards? So understand that management structure when it comes to your information security program. If you're a small company, then your management structure is you and maybe 2 other people. Communication, how do you communicate this information security program, incidents when happen, etc. Communication. So what would be will the IT manager communicate to the CEO, to the CEO, etc. How does that work? Culture and climate is very important. As an IT professional and executive for many years, I've been hope to accomplish before I pass away is to develop a cybersecurity aware culture in the organization in which I work. Always trying to make people aware. Don't click. Be vigilant. Pay attention. So just culture. Some people don't care, so you have to understand that, and you have to maybe have to cut some losses for people that don't take security serious enough to your standards. But that's important. And then there's history and lessons learned. Once you get the program going, this will be a drivers to improve it. Okay, risk management real quick is several steps. The plan step is identify the team, identify the scope, identify the method, identify the tools, and understand acceptable risk levels. So again, it can be very simple. You look at the scope. You say, okay, I'm going to this risk plan is going to cover all my physical hardware, and it's going to cover my facilities, etc. It's going to cover my inventory. If you have the kind of business that has inventory, you have to consider all of that. The method, you can get stuff like that online, and the tools you can use, again, Excel spreadsheets, simple if you want, but you can get tools like available online to you. And you have to identify what you're going to consider to be acceptable risk. Some people say, okay, well, I'm going to let our employees have this laptop, and they can travel with it, and they can use it for personal use, so I accept the risk. And others would say, nope, cannot use it for personal use, for business only, so I do not accept that risk, so et cetera, et cetera. Then after the planning stage is collect information. You need to identify your assets, and this is very important. You have to identify your assets. If you're creating financial statements, you probably have this done already. But assign a value to each asset. Your laptops, your computers, whatever, your software that you buy. Identify vulnerabilities to those threats. So again, take an example of the laptop. The vulnerabilities, so things like I said, theft, malicious code, somebody drops it, breakage, etc. So you look at those threats. So you identify the vulnerabilities. Where am I vulnerable? Am I doing patching? Are my employees using a strong password? Are they cybersecurity aware of phishing, what it is? What are my vulnerabilities? Then you calculate your risk based on each one, each asset. Then you do a cost-benefit analysis, and then your uncertainty analysis. These things, again, you can Google, and you can find more information. But the next step is to define your recommendations. You're either going to mitigate that risk, which is to put a control in place. So for instance, I remember working for a company in order to control laptop theft. When laptops first came out, they used to sell something where you would lock your laptop to your desk with a key. So no one could walk away with that laptop. So that's what they did too. That must be a control to mitigate that risk of theft. But the next option is risk transference, which is you can, for example, purchase insurance. Risk acceptance, sorry, that means you do nothing. I worked for a company one time where the chairman of the board refused to change his password every 90 days. Good standard, get your passwords changed at least every 90 days. And he had explained to them after that he accepted that risk to change it once a year. And he accepted that risk. Risk avoidance is when you discontinue the activity altogether. You stop selling, you stop giving out laptops, desktops only. So that's an example. Okay, so here's some frameworks that you can use for risk practice. You can again Google this information and get some information about risk and managing and risk management. Okay, the next important step is after you got your governance in place and your risk management program going, is information security controls, compliance, and audit. And information security controls, as also known as safeguard or countermeasure, is a mechanism that's, I said, put in place to mitigate. There are three different types of controls, three classes of controls. ISO calls them administrative, technical, and physical, and NIST calls them management, operational, and technical. ISO is an international standard, global international standard. NIST is a standard in the United States. So administrative controls, technical controls, and physical controls. Administrative controls, for instance, is a policy. I create a policy that tells my employees how they must behave on the internet, and how they must use my equipment, etc. A technical control or operational control is like when I said to you about patching. Make sure you put the patches in place. And the physical control is, of course, the lock and key on the doors, on the laptops, etc. Okay, so control frameworks, you do want to get to understand them. Here are some control frameworks. ISO 27001 is very popular. Companies can be, if you're certified, you've got an information security management system in place, and you're certified by ISO 27001, then you can brag, and you can have many benefits. It's known to get you more customers, etc. Because now your customers feel comfortable that you have cybersecurity in place to protect their data. So there's the NIST SP 800-53. Okay, so now what you really want, the meat and potatoes here, building an information security management program. So number one is to understand the business and the business continuity. So again, as I said to you, approach IT security, information security as a critical business function. So collect information, emergency contact information for critical employees, essential third parties, personnel such as key customers, partners, service providers, legal counsel, and law enforcement. Number two, also under this same step, is assist the business in developing the business operational plans. Standard business procedures for normal operations. You should be documenting that, even if it's very simple, rudimentary, but you should have documented. Alternate business procedures for other than normal practices. So what happens if the power goes out? What am I going to do in my shop? I'm selling dresses. Power goes out. There's still enough light for people to come in and see, but how do I continue to operate? Include a security addendum that documents current physical security measures and methods to replace these security controls if they're impacted in the event of incident. So document your security. Document what you have in place at present. Again, you don't have to be like corporate. I'm talking to the smaller guys now. Don't have to be all that sophisticated, but just document it. And then business operations plan should acknowledge any compliance framework. So if you're selling stuff and you have to be PCI compliant, then take into consideration and document your business plans. Should you need to be in business continuity mode? How do you report to PCI, etc. Okay, also on the first step is training employees on business operations, business continuity, and DR plans. It's important. Once a year, you take your 3 or 4 employees and practice what happens if the power goes out, or practice what happens if this computer is down, or practice if we've been hit by a worm or something like that. So conduct these on a regular basis, and learn from these, do lessons learned debriefings, and use realistic drills, what they call tabletop exercises. Pretend, in a tabletop exercise, we pretend that something has happened, a scenario. We create a scenario and then we walk through it. What will we do? Develop a business continuity and disaster recovery plan. Again, create emergency plans with critical suppliers. Create notification processes to alert customers. Incorporate alternative business operations. What do I do what do I do? I should be able to go to a book, something when I'm faced with a crisis. A playbook. Prepare for local emergency. The stuff again should be doing automatically under hurricane. So none of this stuff you may already be doing. But this is business continuity, folks. 101, very important. Plan to move to an alternate site if you have to. Not always easy, especially in Bermuda, but plan to move to an alternate site. Plan for retrieving and restoring backup data. Okay, the second step is develop a security program. This is a very important step. So develop it and get approved at least these 9 policies, at least these policies, even if they're very 1 or 2 pages. 1 page is simple, but you should have these policies in place. Information security policy, an access control policy. The information security policy will tell you, okay, you have to create a password. Your password has to be so long, it has to consist of so many characters, and has to expire so many days. Access control policies. If you are a manager, then you'll get access to this, then the other. If you're not going to get access. So you create the policies to let people know what access control and what rights they have when you're using your equipment. Acceptable use, again, another very important one. How can employees use your computer? Can they use it just go to any website that they want? What about emails? What kind of emails are they sending? Are they using profane language, etc.? Incident change management policy. If I'm changing out, sounds for a small company doesn't sound necessary, but it is important, because if I got to get rid of that piece of equipment, that server, I need a change management document to note, so that in the future, when I want to know when did we change that computer, I have a document that says, okay, we changed that computer on such and such a date. This is what we did to change it. Disaster recovery policy, business continuity policy. These are some policies that you should have at least. You recommend at least these 9, but I say at least 4 or 5 of these. Very important. The first 5 are very important. Essentials is cybersecurity best practice to implement reducing risk. So some of the things you should know: back up your business data, back up your business data, back up your business data daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. Ensure IT assets are protected. Things like antivirus is on there. Make sure you're doing your patching. Apply your security patch on a regular basis. Some people do it weekly, some people do it monthly, some people do it when the patches come out, but at least monthly. Secure wireless networks. Make sure you got strong password. Make sure you hide the broadcast ID, which is the SSID. Enable system and network audit logs. Audit logs are very important. If you don't have an IT guy, have those logs available if you need an IT forensic person has to come in to find out what happened on your network if you are breached. Review security controls and document for an audit. If you don't have a team to do it, again, you can do a self-audit. A small company, you can get this stuff online of how to do an audit. Or if not, if you're a larger company and can afford it, then you call one of the other guys, a third party, to help you with your audit. But limit direct access to customer records. Control who has access to your very valuable critical data. This is what I call the crown jewels. Not everybody should have access to the crown jewels. The person who comes in to clean your office at night should not have access to the crown jewels. So there should not be a computer sitting there that's no username and password and they can log into. Implement an email security gateway, a very popular tool, something called Mimecast. So Mimecast would all your emails go through Mimecast first before they come to you. So what Mimecast does is cuts out all the spam. It cuts out some of the phishing. It cuts out a lot of unnecessary emails, and it also provides archive. And if your email server is down, even if you're in the cloud, O365, then you can use Mimecast. It will still be available to you. Your emails are still available, even if your Exchange server is down, email server is down. So this is a very critical one. Train employees regularly. We are at war, cybersecurity war, and if you had to protect your company, if you had to protect this country, or let's say you have to protect your company from a major threat, would you hire a guy on the street who sweeps the streets, or would you hire a guy who's fully versed in the military, knows how to shoot a gun, knows all of that stuff? Of course, you're going to hire that guy. Why? Because he's been trained. I teach all the time. Cybersecurity awareness, you cannot teach it once a year. You must have regular cybersecurity training. You must create a cybersecurity training program at your office. Once a month is ideal for me. I like it once a month. Different topics. Strong passwords, phishing. How many, did you know that there are over 20 different red flags in an email that can be phishing, identified as phishing? Of the 7 areas, the to, the from, the URL links, etc., the body of the email. 22 red flags. You wouldn't know that if you didn't have training. You need to be trained on how to identify a phishing email. That is where the bad guys get in, folks. So training, security awareness training is utmost important from a company of 2 people to a company of 2,000, 200,000. Security awareness training is critical, and you cannot do it once a month. You need regular training. Keep the troops abreast. Keep the troops. We're at war, and you must. The bad guys are up all night and doing their thing, so we need to be just as vigilant. Okay, and also developing our program, a security program, we need to identify which security practices you are not able to provide. And if you can provide it, then you look for a third-party provider, a managed service provider, like I said, Mimecast. Develop an incident management program. Again, these are some of the things you need to be doing in that incident management program. Maintain up-to-date configuration management. Document it, what this configuration on the server should look like in case that server goes down. Maintain emergency contacts. Create incident response runbook templates. If I'm hit with a ransomware, what do I do? If my laptop is stolen, what do I do? Runbooks, we call them. Establish notification procedures. Who do I notify? Do I notify who notifies who? Do I notify the authority? Define and establish priority notification to law enforcement. Verified, and I met with the police recently, and they are definitely ramping up their cybersecurity, and we have one of the best the police department cybersecurity forensics in the Western world. Identify an incident response operations meet regulatory requirements. If you have, again, be compliant when PIPA comes out, or if you have to be HIPAA compliant or PCI compliant, then you must make sure that during an incident you're still compliant. And then, of course, conduct incident response training with the team. Practice, be ready, practice it. Practice being ready for incidents. Number 3, actions to follow during the cybersecurity incident. So identify the compromised and impact assets. This is important. Identify the asset that's been compromised and verify whether protected data is involved. Verify any data on that information, any data on that server. Is there any data on that server? And if so, what kind of data is it? And then initiate the incident response plan to minimize the business impact. Initiate emergency response contingency plans if necessary. So if the event is a case where I have to move facilities or I have to invoke my disaster recovery plan, then that has to be considered at this point. Reduce damage by removing. That's one of the very first steps to teach the team is disconnect that machine from the network. Disconnect it from the network. And as a matter of fact, if you're a small enough shop, you might want to disconnect everybody until you can understand what has happened. But certainly disconnect that machine. Obtain secure and system configuration, network, and intrusion detection logs. So look at the log. That's why it's important to keep logs. And work with legal counsel to notify if you're depending on the size of your organization. Legal normally gets involved in this. If you have a legal team, if you don't, I'm sure you have a lawyer because you're, as an open organization, you probably have a lawyer. But legal needs to be involved because you might have to communicate to your customers that there's been a data breach, etc. And you might have to contact a third party to help you with your forensics and data retrieval. The 4th step is to return to normal operations. This is typically done by an IT department, but these are some of the things you do to get back to normal. You establish recovery points, and the impacted machines are recovered in stages, and operations is gradually restored. After you test it, though, after testing, make sure it's fully clean. Take the necessary action to restore the systems to standard configuration. Use backups data to restore systems at last known clean status. Update restored systems with current data and from manual transactions. So while you were out, you might have had some system was out. You might have had some manual transactions that you did in the shop. You're selling clothes again. You had some manual transactions. You want to then put those transactions into the system, and then create a clean backup. After you've done all that, create another clean backup now, and then reestablish normal business operations. All right. So coming to the tail end now, I want to ask the question, and I know you probably can, but I just sort of give you a chance to think about it, and you can tell me how many got this right. But what is the greatest vulnerability of the Great Wall of China? Think about it for a second. What is the greatest vulnerability of the Great Walls of China? It took many years to build, much labor, manpower, decades to build. What's the greatest weakness? The greatest weakness is the human beings at the entry points, at the gate. Human beings at the gate. So, malware attacks, as I said, is the most prominent way. Phishing is the most prominent way to get into your systems. They will not work without you clicking. So, in 2016, according to leading industry and government reports, over blank of all cyber attacks are successfully executed with information stolen from employees who unwittingly give away their system ID and access credentials to hackers, unwittingly through phishing. You want to guess what the percentage was back in 2016? Let's see if you got it right. 90%. 90% of all attacks comes through a human being. So, folks, we need to make sure that our staff are cybersecurity aware and trained and know how to spot a phishing email and know how to be security conscious all times to protect themselves as well as the company. And that's it for my slide presentation. I'm willing to take any questions if there are any questions. Questions? Then I want to thank you all for joining me today. I hope you got something out of this. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I can provide any help as an IT security professional through the chapter. You can reach me at info@isc2chapter-bermuda.org at the bottom of the screen. Again, thank you all very much. And since there are no questions, Jean, did I miss any questions? I don't see any here.
No questions. Just one person saying thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. I enjoyed that. You guys have a great holiday and a happy new year. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.